I have a weird relationship with Iron Man. While I absolutely love the Marvel Cinematic Universe's version of the character, he's never really worked for me in the comics. He's never been quite as charming or human as Robert Downey Jr. manages to portray him, and that's a shame. I tried Matt Fraction's run on the character, I tried Kurt Busiek's run during the Heroes Return stuff, but neither of them worked for me. This series here is actually the first Iron Man book that I have in totality, and I'm not sure yet if that's a good thing. My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown, episode 1.4, Iron Man Reborn. Also launched in November of 1996, Iron Man was written by Jim Lee and Scott Lobdell, with art by Whilce Portacio and Scott Williams. Joe Chiodo, Martin Jimenez, and Wildstorm FX handled the colors on this one. Heroes Reborn Iron Man ran for a total of 13 issues before cancellation, but for now, we're going to be looking at issues 1 through 5. We open in a flashback. A suit resembling the Iron Man armor is being put through its paces, but not with Tony Stark in the pilot seat. Rather, it's Tony's best friend, Rebel O'Reilly. During the test, the suit has an electrical short and detonates, killing Tony's best friend. Fast forward a few years, and we're introduced to a very different Tony Stark. He's just won a lawsuit that New York City brought against him, and he is ready to partay, Mr. Krabs. His circle of friends caution him against it. This whole affair is better left behind him. Celebrating just rubs it in everyone's faces. Amongst the nays are Happy Hogan, Stark's publicist, as well as head of Stark's security, Liz Ross. Tony turns to the only friend left to him, Bruce Banner, for the decision. Quiet and unsure, Bruce says that they found him innocent, so you might as well go. Liz complains to Bruce as Tony leaves, and he defends his friends. Tony wasn't always like this. Once he dreamed of changing the world, along with the rest of the Atomic Knights. Then Rebel died, and everything changed. The party goes on, introducing Tony's psychiatrist, Leonard Sampson, his attorney, Jennifer Walters, his government contact, Jasper Sitwell, and his personal assistant, Pepper Potts. We learn that Tony had been buying companies and then selling them off in pieces. Apparently, Sampson's testimony is largely what kept Tony out of jail, although I'm not sure how. Any lawyers in the room? A slightly drunk Pepper confronts Tony for his arrogance before a crowd. She throws her drink in his face and storms off. Liz, as head of security, is pissed that this happened, and Bruce is trying to talk her down when she gets an alert. Something is up at the Buffalo Annex. Turns out that while everyone else was partying, a Stark employee reveals himself to be an agent of Hydra, and he kills his fellow security guards. This gives Hydra access to the Buffalo Annex of Stark International, home of Operation Gamma. Uh-oh. I really love the delivery for this moment. I don't know if Lobdell planned this, or if Jim Lee did, or Whilce Portacio, but man, when the Stark Hydra spy announces his presence to his fellow guards, he stands up, starts monologuing, and shoots them all. And with each point he makes, he kills another guard. It's super cinematic. I can see this in my head so easily. Awesomely done, gentlemen. Tony checks on Pepper out in the balcony. She's still upset, but she doesn't hate Tony. She just doesn't get it. What happened to him that made him put on this emotional armor? Tony explains that he wants to make sure she understands. That she is fired. Sampson tries to appeal to Tony's humanity after that little scene, and Tony brushes him off. He put up with this shrink crap in order to win the case, but that doesn't mean that his opinions mean anything to Tony. So, okay, Sampson asks, then what? Push away anyone whose opinion you can't buy? Just tear down everything around you until there's nothing left? When exactly did you stop building things, Tony, and start tearing them down? Speaking of destroying things, Liz and Bruce arrive at the Buffalo Annex and take no prisoners. When the tower hails her helicopter incorrectly, Liz knows that something is wrong and wastes no time going on the offensive. As she scans the wreckage, there appears to be a survivor, Madam Hydra. Liz seems to recognize her and tells Bruce to call for backup. He can't, though, because he's working with them. Bruce knocks Liz out. The concerns of his friends seem to have finally struck a nerve with Tony. He talks to Sitwell about whether or not he's really that bad a guy. Sitwell responds by telling Tony that men like them are above such concerns. They have to be in order to do what they do. That ominous note is interrupted, though. Looks like Commander Ross did manage to get an emergency broadcast off. Tony wants to investigate, but Sitwell volunteers instead. Tony, after all, has a party to go to. At Buffalo, we learn that Bruce contacted Hydra in order to get their help in dismantling his gamma bomb. Naturally, Hydra took advantage of the good doctor. They plan to destroy the bomb, sure, but they're going to do it by detonating it. Solid plan, guys, just super good. Bruce opposes this idea, so he's knocked unconscious and sealed inside the gamma chamber. Once she regains consciousness, Liz investigates and discovers this for herself. She tries to get Bruce out, but can't. Hydra sealed it shut. Nor can Bruce stop the detonation. They overrode the failsafe. This bomb is going to go off. It's just a matter of how many die when it does. Bruce drops the bomb down its chute, 13 miles straight down, and gives one life to save 12 million. Tony, who has decided to actually run his business and has thus joined Sitwell on the investigation, is closing in fast. Sitwell is either super up to something or he's really innocent because he's downplaying this whole scenario really hard. It was probably a faulty alarm. We've only had a skeleton crew at Buffalo for years. It's no biggie. Until they spot a giant green glowing hole 10 miles out. Oh yeah, you know where this is going. As they approach the facility, Stark's team discovers a ginormous green man who is practically radiating gamma energy. Spooked by the chopper, the soon-to-be-named Hulk hurls a boulder at it. The chopper crashes, but Tony manages to pull Sitwell out. That's when Sitwell points out that Tony has other problems, like the shrapnel in his gut. In order to live, he descends into the complex and rediscovers his abandoned prototype for the Project Prometheus Rising, the suit that Rebel died to perfect. The Hulk returned to the Annex in order to protect Liz Ross, but Tony doesn't know who or what this thing is, so he confronts him as Iron Man. This confrontation takes up all of the second issue, with the fight swinging in both Iron Man's favor and then the Hulk's. Iron Man demonstrates his repulsor blast for the first time, as well as a tractor beam. He even manages to get the Hulk away from the facility, protecting Ross and Sitwell, and they finish their confrontation above Niagara Falls. Drained of energy, suffering from blood loss, and probably a bit punch-drunk, Iron Man grabs some electrical cables and shoves them into the Hulk. The backlash knocks Tony out as well, casting them both over the falls. Tony, as Iron Man, learns about the gamma bomb and Bruce's death from Liz. Sitwell doesn't like any of this because he's been scheming to run Stark International under Tony's nose, and all of this puts that in jeopardy. So I'm guessing that Sitwell got Buffalo up and running after Tony closed it due to Rebel's death. Now he's responsible for getting Bruce killed there too, so way to go, Sitwell. I'm also guessing that Sitwell commissioned the gamma bomb. Hopefully for the US government, but that's still not great. Despite his cinematic counterpart being a Hydra agent, in classic continuity, Jasper Sitwell is an okay guy. Hopefully this version is just a scheming a-hole and not an evil tool. Issue 3 does little to warm me towards Sitwell. The Fantastic Four show up after the initial ruckus. Reed Richards, leader of the Four, wants to find out what happened to his old college pal Tony Stark. But the only reason Sitwell even lets them on the property is because Nick Fury said to. What a weasel. And that stuff is great and all, but for real, where the heck is Tony Stark? Well, he's in Eastchester, making a surprise visit to Pepper Potts. Pepper is the only living person outside of Stark who had seen the Prometheum armor, so she's Stark's most confidential chance for help. She manages to jumpstart his armor and he brings her up to speed. She also brings him up to speed about her firing, which he remarks was a stupid thing to do. I guess that means he takes it back? They head for Stark's Westchester facility and he runs a diagnostic on the suit. And the suit is great. Hell, if it wasn't for needing the suit to live, Tony feels better than he has in a while. He's active, he's doing something, and he's pumped. Pepper is glad to hear it, but that's when the Fantastic Four show up. Last they heard, this mysterious Iron Man was the last person to see Stark alive, and so they want to chat with the guy. There's a brief tussle before Tony recognizes Reed, giving Pepper a chance to step in with the baloney bodyguard story. Iron Man goes and gets Tony, who then assures everyone that he's fine. In fact, he feels like he has it all under control. Remember that lawsuit from issue 1 where Tony was buying and selling other companies? One of those companies was Park Fiber Optics, previously run by Arthur Park. Despite losing the case, Park can't let this go. Stark must be held accountable. He has to pay. Oh, and we continue our tour of Iron Man villains as we stop by Hidden Hydra location. They hire Whirlwind, who kills a bunch of Hydra goons, to help them out. There was some confusion regarding the scheduling, hence the murder. Don't worry about it. I think he's just dumb. I mean, was he like, I kill people by spinning, I'm already silly, so I might as well play into it? Or is this a disarming tactic to throw people that he's dealing with off? I guess we'll find out later. Issue 4 opens with Liz Ross visiting her father, Thunderbolt Ross. Holy crap, people! I know I'm going to sound like an idiot here, but I didn't even realize that Liz is Bruce's longtime love interest, Betty Ross. Betty's so unassuming in the 616 continuity that I never made the connection. And yes, I know about Red She-Hulk, but we're dealing with origin story Liz here. She's a million miles away from that story. I like this overhaul, Mr. Lee and Lobdell. Nice one. Thunderbolt is recovering from a heart attack, but has all of his classic fire, even smoking in his hospital bed. As Liz leaves, she ruminates about the creation of the Hulk, and I think that she knows that Bruce died to create the Hulk. Tony is doing a bit of thinking himself as he carves out a space for an armory below his building. He's enjoying the work, but is interrupted by a meeting with Sitwell. We get to see a new function of his armor here. As he takes pieces off, they automatically go invisible. And Tony Stark, he's always doing things. Tony's meeting concerns the Buffalo Annex and exactly what was going on up there. Sitwell can't legally say. The work was contracted through Stark International, but it's for the U.S. government. Whatever Bruce was working on was need-to-know only. This disturbs the crap out of Tony. What has his company been up to without his knowledge? Sure, Sitwell explains there were decisions that were made while Stark was mentally absent. Those decisions kept Stark International going. Sitwell warns Tony that he isn't a knight in shining armor. Don't take your new bodyguard literally. You're a human being, and the last time you overworked yourself, the last person in that suit died. Damn! That is a wicked crotch shot, Sitwell. You're one cold-blooded mother. Shut your mouth! But Tony thinks that he might be right. He's an inventor. He likes to push the envelope. But what happens if someone else gets hurt when he's Iron Man? Before he finds the answer to that question, his 3 o'clock appointment is here. Dr. Arthur Parks. Tony opens the discussion by trying to explain his mindset. He's come to see his recent actions in a new light and seems honestly penitent for what he did to Parks' company. But Arthur doesn't care. Tony didn't just break the law, he broke his word to Arthur. He ruined the lives of everyone who depended on those jobs. And if the law won't hold him accountable, then Park will. A bright pink light bursts from Park's body, transforming him into the living laser. Before Tony killed his company, Parks figured out a way to channel fiber optics through the human nervous system. The transformation also comes with armor, which I thought was just kind of weird. I mean, it's neat, but it's weird. Tony dives into his pool to buy time and summons his invisible armor pieces. The laser blasts into the pool, creating enough steam to cover Tony, and Iron Man arrives on the scene from the pool, which you'd think the laser would think is weird, but maybe he's not in his right mind, I guess. The laser tries to reason with Iron Man. After all, his problem is with Tony Stark, not this bodyguard. But shockingly, Iron Man defends Stark. Yes, he's hurt people, that's true, and he's going to need to deal with that, but Parks was the one who turned himself into a walking WMD. Park is the one who allowed himself to be consumed by hate. The two sync up their energy blasts, and Iron Man feeds it back on Parks. The discharge burns away his armor, his flesh, his very humanity, until all that's left is a sad man made of energy. And if you asked him to, Parks would do it again and again. There are 2 other small scenes in this issue. The first is Bruce Banner contacting Leonard Samson. This is the first time we see Bruce de-hulked since his transformation. He needs help, understatement of the year, but he hangs up before going into details. Don't worry though, that plot thread will be picked up in our next episode. Our final scene is Whirlwind kidnapping Pepper. He's pretty nonchalant about it too. Whirlwind is a very laid-back villain for hire. I don't know if I like this friendly attitude in a villain. It's pretty off-putting. Liefeld does a bit of time manipulation in telling the story, so I'm a streamline a bit for brevity's sake. Tony, as Iron Man, started his day by scouring the Hudson River for signs of the Hulk. This is despite Thunderbolt Ross claiming that the Hulk was stomping all over the country, so he's both everywhere but is also untraceable. We're getting a bit sloppy here. Iron Man comes up empty-handed, and to a gun pointed at his head. Liz Ross doesn't trust Tony Stark's new mysterious bodyguard. After all, she's been head of security for years, so why does Tony need this guy now? Where did he come from? Basically, she's telling Iron Man that if she finds any reason to do so, she'll crush Iron Man before he has a chance to hurt Tony. In an amazingly crappy moment, Iron Man responds, quote, "Let's hope you do a better job protecting him than you did protecting Dr. Banner," unquote. Holy crap, dude. She punches his smug metal face and storms away. Clearly, Tony's emotional journey isn't over yet. I love this scene. Artist Ryan Benjamin times it out perfectly with a nice big panel after Iron Man says the line. Let's just let that sink in for a moment. That's the emotional slap in the face that Liz felt, and then she returns fire. Tony just can't see that's a sore spot for her, because I think it is for him too. I think Tony's hurting, and that he blames Liz at least a bit for Bruce's fate, and rather than reach out to her, he pushes her away. It's a terrible personal moment, but it's a great story moment to help humanize Tony some more. Having just crapped all over one of the few meaningful relationships he has left, Stark heads inside and answers a phone call. It's Whirlwind, and he has Miss Potts, and he wants to meet Tony alone. First sign of Iron Man, and Potts dies. So, Tony goes to meet him, and the pair spend the rest of the issue exchanging deadly quips. Tony finally draws Whirlwind to his kinetic intake converter. Basically, it's a science MacGuffin, and it kills Whirlwind. Not that that was Tony's goal, but he couldn't save Whirlwind, and Whirlwind didn't believe Tony when he tried to get him to stop. It's one of those, I didn't want to kill you, but I don't feel bad about you dying either kind of moments. Having lost his biosignature, Hydra assumes that Whirlwind has failed. Madam Hydra is annoyed, but her boss is even more annoyed with her. The Mandarin has a purpose for Tony Stark, and he needs him alive. Dude, the Mandarin? I don't know much about anything about Iron Man in detail, but I do know that the Mandarin is Tony Stark's arch enemy. The Batman has the Joker, Spider-Man has the Green Goblin, the X-Men have Magneto, and Iron Man has the Mandarin. I hope that this gets followed up on, because I am stoked for that. The idea of seeing a new take on him with none of the continuity baggage is really appealing to me. Bruce's call with Samson continues this issue, which is some weird timing. Has Bruce been on the phone since the last issue? Leonard tries to talk Bruce into turning himself in. He'll do everything he can to help on his end. Tony will be glad to help too, but Bruce laughs that off. Nah, Tony, no. But maybe Reed. Some cops start to nose around him, forcing Bruce to run, which is also weird because he's thought dead and no one knows that he's the Hulk, so why are they looking for him? Why didn't we just get this bit of story last issue where it would have fit better? We could have avoided the whole, Bruce has been on the phone for, days kind of thing. Anyway, we end with Tony and Pepper talking about the past few days. Things have been pretty terrible, and Stark isn't sure how it all happened. Can he be proud of anything that he's done? The Gamma Bomb, Bruce's death, Arthur Parks becoming the living laser, Hydra hiring Whirlwind to kill him? How did his life go so wrong? It seems that accidentally killing Whirlwind has put Tony in a bit of a funk. Which is understandable, I'm not knocking it. Despite fighting for his life, Tony has never killed a man before. That's gotta mess someone up, especially a man who's just starting to find his moral center. Pepper then tries to cheer him up by telling him that he's also responsible for bringing together the Avengers. This boggles Tony's mind. He doesn't even know who they are, much less how he's involved with them. Pepper tries to open a file so she can relate the whole story, but apparently she opened Google Maps instead because she announces that Avengers Island is gone. Wow, is there a lot to unpack here. So let's start with the visuals. For the most part, I like the work Whilce Portacio did here. There are some really terrible moments. Liz Ross's dress at the party, Potts' jumpsuit at the party, Sitwell looking exactly like Leonard Samson in issue 1, Arthur Park's face in general, dear God. But those moments feel few and far between. Portassio's penchant for heavy shadows gives the book a real corporate espionage feel for the first few issues that I really appreciate. Issue 1 in particular stands out to me. Portasio has a penchant for very unconventional page layouts. He likes to leave lots of white space on a page. Sometimes this works, like when Bruce is talking to Madame Hydra at the Gamma Chamber. This is nicely done. The chamber looks sci-fi as hell, and there's lots of space for word balloons. We move down to the Madam and Bruce, closing in as Bruce realizes that there's something wrong. Then we end on one panel that's set lower. The nice order has been broken. There's been a slight change of plans. Nice layout, Mr. Portasio. I like how huge Portasio made the Hulk, too. He feels more like an actual hulking monster than just a buff green dude. I'll fully admit that the visual designs for the Living Laser and Whirlwind are garbage, though. The Laser should have just stayed in street clothes. There's no reason for him to have also designed a supersuit on top of putting fiber optics in his body. And Whirlwind looks like X-Men villain Strife, just with some green effects. I get that the idea is that he spins really fast, allowing the blades that are built into his costume to slice up his victims, but that seems like a terrible way to kill people. So the villains are kind of lame, but what about our titular hero? What about Iron Man? Let's talk about the armor. This is an Iron Man book, after all. We're here for a flying suit of armor. This particular incarnation comes in classic red and gold, has tractor beams, repulsor blades, and fight capabilities. It also has a red Speedo, which I just think is funny more than anything else. Oh, and he's got a six-pack. Nice to know that this armor works out. Design-wise, I'd say that the biggest departures are the metal muscles, the mask, and those exhaust pipes. The metal parts of the armor appear to just be bundles of metal cabling. So, like, if you pushed a finger into there, would they part and reveal flesh underneath? I don't know. They don't look like a single solid piece of metal, so I'd think that they're just to connect the armor together, but that seems weird too. I like the way that they look. Again, they look like muscle tissue, emphasizing the buff superhero look. The mask kind of works for me. I like the angular shape and expressive eyes. Here on issue 1's cover, they look down menacingly like a badass. But then on issue 3, they tilt back in surprise and horror. The mouth bugs me just because it always appears to be open. On the one hand, that's great. When dialogue balloons point to him, it looks like Iron Man is actually speaking. But it also means that he has this vapid, slack-jawed look about him all of the time. Finally, we have the exhaust pipes. And I'm just going to say it. I like these things. I don't know why I like them, though. I think that the pipes kind of look like the main skeletal structure of wings, and so the pipes bring to mind the flight's flying abilities. I mean, they don't really look like wings. I'm definitely stretching to find some kind of reason for why they speak to me, because I've got nothing otherwise. And I'm calling them exhaust pipes because I have no idea what they're supposed to do. There's a shot at the start of issue 2 that has steam coming from several spots on his body, including the pipes, so I'm just guessing that they're for exhaust. You would think that such a major change in Iron Man's overall design would have a story point, but nah, at least nothing so far. Now, compared to Fantastic Four, which was basically just the same type of book, just with a coat of sexy Jim Lee paint, or Captain America, which basically tried its best not to have a plot at all, there are a lot of changes to continuity here. The biggest, to me, is the introduction of Rebel O'Reilly. You already heard me gush about how much I like the idea of the Atomic Knights back in the Fantastic Four episode, and I'm thrilled to see it further explored here. I also love that the armor that Rebel pilots in the flashback is silver and red, a nice nod to Tony's classic Silver Centurion armor. I also like that Rebel's death gives us a good reason for why an idealist like young Tony Stark becomes embittered jerkwad Stark. His death hurt Tony so badly that he withdrew from humanity. Nearly dying and being forced to physically wear armor helps to draw Tony back out of that shell, and I love it. I'd like to think that the death of Bruce helped as well. Tony needs to start to appreciate the people around him before they're gone. We also have the folding in of the Hulk's origin and general cast. Now, I think that this is kind of interesting because it's a bit prescient. During the original Sin event a few years back, Marvel revealed that Tony Stark took a look at Banner's original Gamma Bomb and had a hand in creating the Hulk. The two stories are very different, but I love how these things happen. Giving Bruce a group of close friends like Tony and Reed means he doesn't have to carry the burden of being the Hulk alone. And I really like how Bruce sacrifices himself to save lives. A quiet, heroic moment for this awkward man. I know that the Industrial Revolution crossover is the next big part of the Hulk story, so I'm pumped to read that. Liz Ross is a confident badass, Pepper tends to know more about what's going on than Tony ever does, and Sitwell's a schemer. This is a good supporting cast full of interesting characters. I also like that the authors managed to make Iron Man's story compelling while pulling it out of a war situation. One of the tricks with tying comic stories to contemporary events is how do writers handle the sliding timescale. Tony was originally injured in Vietnam, which would mean that in 1997, Tony would have been anywhere from his 40s to his 60s, depending on exactly when he was injured. But this has been updated to the war in the Middle East for more modern audiences. But this volume solves that problem entirely. He's injured in an accident, needs the suit, discovers that his company is being misused, bam, there you go, we got a book. One of the things that I don't like, though, is Tony's lack of growth. Yeah, we're just starting, I know. This is going to take time, and I'm down to wait. But just because Tony has seen the light doesn't mean that he's a good guy. Almost all of Tony's actions in these issues are self-centered. Yeah, I'll fully give you that he draws off the Hulk in issue 2 to protect Liz and Sitwell, but his battles against the Laser and Whirlwind are purely defensive. Tony isn't going out and helping people yet, he's just covering his own ass. When the Laser attacks, Tony does nothing to make amends for the harm he's caused. Yes, Parks was a nutjob, but he was a nutjob with a point. All Tony would have had to do at the end of this would be to have Pepper put together a list of Park Fiber Optics employees and offer them jobs, or give them severance pay, or something. I want a gesture of humanity from Tony, something to show that he's realized how big an impact his actions have had and that he wants to make up for it. Sure, he does protect Pepper during Whirlwind's assault, but he knows Pepper, he cares for her, it's natural for him to save her. I feel like this is still more of a selfish instinct than it is a selfless instinct. Having now read and reread these issues a few times now, I gotta say, I think it's my overall favorite book so far. I like the drama, the action, the intrigue. Portasio does a pretty good job for the most part, largely saved by the coloring of Joe Chiodo, Martin Jimenez, and Wildstorm effects. The reinvention of so much of the Hulk mythos is a nice touch, and overall it's a satisfying read. Fantastic Four is drier and way more expositional, which is why it suffers a bit when compared to Iron Man for me. And that just leaves us with the Avengers. We've had this team teased all over the place. Cap and Thor have appeared in Fantastic Four, Nick Fury name-dropped them in Captain America, and now Tony has somehow inspired the team? I don't know how that happened, but I'm pumped. Who's going to be on the team? How will they adapt to this new world? Join us next time as we meet the Earth's mightiest heroes. Everyone, there are a million podcasts vying for your time and attention, and I'd like to thank you for listening to mine. If you would like to get in touch with me to share a concern, request a series, compliment me, berate me, whatever you like, send me an email at cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Otherwise, thanks for listening.